Hi, everyone. Jane Applegath here, founder of the Epic Vision Zone, where your life becomes epic. Each show, we offer you an inspiring person or message to bring you closer to living your epic life now. You can listen to the audio version on your favorite app or watch it on YouTube, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Robin Sharma wrote, "Leadership is not about titles, positions, or flowcharts. It is about one life influencing another." Gary C. Laney says your sphere of influence is the essential ingredient in your recipe for success, respect, and legacy. A 2 times best-selling author, serial entrepreneur, former high-tech executive, CEO of Success Masters, and a dynamic speaker, Gary has inspired tens of thousands of entrepreneurs and business and sales professionals with personal and professional success training. In his new book, Become a Super Leader, The 4 Essential Anchors for Mastering Influence Leadership, Gary takes readers on a journey towards becoming what he calls an influential super leader. He writes, "Inspiring to the level of an influential super leader is achievable and can be learned." In his new book delivers a proven process for developing the necessary habits to ignite highly competitive leadership skills. He says to ask yourself what one competency will become your competitive superpower to propel you into the category of super leader. And he also says that you must be willing to commit. His book, Become a Super Leader, is a must-have roadmap to influential leadership and soon to become another bestseller. Welcome, Gary. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Jane. It's nice to be here with you again. Thanks for having me back.
Yes, absolutely. I am so excited for this new book release, Gary. And we were chatting a little earlier on and just talking in reference to leaving a legacy and what a super leader is and how to become one. So, with that being said, what inspired you to uncover the mastery of leadership?
That's a good question. I wrote a book called The Power of Strategic Influence that you know about, that we interviewed with about a year ago. And during that process, and I'm very processing oriented. If you read my books, there's always, a very systematic way of going through the book. I'm very progressive that way. And that book also has success factors. One of the success factors, number 8, in fact, if you read my first book, talks about how to identify and leverage your competitive competencies. You notice that I called it competitive. And that book that chapter became the most popular chapter of my book. It was the chapter that most often people asked me to speak about. They wanted to know, what are the competencies that make a great leader? And so it really needed a full book all by itself. And if you remember, in my first book, I had interviewed and surveyed, I don't know, a few hundred people here in the US, and asking them the question, what does influential mean? What are the competencies you think a good leader requires? How do you become influential? But during that survey, lots of great ideas came back, describing characteristic traits and competencies, that I call them, of a great leader. And so I decided that, that one little survey I did needed a broader perspective. And so I continued as I prepared for this new book, which I didn't know what it was going to be called at the beginning. I thought it might be called Competitive Competencies or Competitive Superpowers. And later on, I really settled on the how to become a super leader. And I love that you added to it influential super leader. Thanks for adding that. That means a lot. So I extended this survey in the U.S. and also worldwide. So now I've surveyed over 1,000 leaders, a vast array of different kinds of leaders in education, in business, in politics, lots of different types of leaders, and asked them the same question, though: what are the characteristics that make a great leader, an exceptional leader, and in terms of my book, a super leader, which I had to define. And so I got back dozens and dozens of characteristics. It wasn't necessarily, I thought it would be interesting to see how it related to different areas of the world. The top 20 or so were basically the same anywhere you went. I mean, integrity, super important anywhere you go.
Mm.
Being authentic, super important. It didn't matter where you lived, that was an important characteristic. And so I narrowed those down to the top 40. And the reason I wanted a top 40 is because my book is built into four constructs, or what I call anchors. I'm all about nautical stuff. I love that kind of stuff in the ocean. So in my book, first book, the same thing. So I wanted to have four anchors. The four anchors are, I'm probably jumping ahead. I'm sorry. Do you want me to continue and finish that thought?
No. Well, let's go
You
on, because I
say.
know we're going to explore what is in the book. But yes, absolutely, we'll get into the anchors. But thank you for giving us
Okay.
some insight into the continuation of leadership mastery. Because the question that I have is, why write a book on influential leadership now? Like I feel like you most likely do, is that leadership is something that we're all looking for, and it's something that we're needing in a world that is constantly changing. So why do you feel that we need influential leadership at this time in our lives?
Well, I did my own study, my own research besides the survey. And by the way, those top 40 narrow down to 13 that I'll explain why that's so important, so you can learn how to develop yourself into a more competent, more competitive leader, and also someone who could potentially be labeled as a super leader at some point. So influential leadership to me is so different than just saying the word leader. There are lots of leaders, let's call them managers. So there's management and there's leadership. And to me, the distinguishing factor is the influence aspect. So a leader that is influential not only is competent, but attracts people through their personality, through the way they speak, the way they treat people. And so and by the way, in my first book, and I'll just say it again, no one has the right to stand on a pedestal and say, I'm influential. You can stand on a pedestal if you want to and say, I'm the leader of this company. I have authority, to make decisions, but you don't have the authority to say you're influential. That's bestowed upon you by whom? By the people that you
Mm,
serve. And
right.
the key word is serve. If you serve people, then you become influential because they know you have your best interest in mind. They know that you're going to be authentic about what you say, that there's no hidden agendas, that you're going to be inclusive. All those terms that we've been hearing, that we hear today, are so important. But I think the key, why it's important today, Gallup, so back to this my research, Gallup has done lots of surveys, one of which said they were trying to determine what employees thought of their leaders. Forget the word
Mm,
influential. They wanted to
right.
know, why are you leaving your jobs? This great resignation that we just experienced, and we're still experiencing, by the way, people leaving their jobs. In fact, Gallup says by the year 2030, 50% of the human capital in the US could be independent. That means they wouldn't be working for someone, they'd be working for themselves. Nothing wrong with that. We're the world and we're the country of dreams. The problem with that is companies, have a purpose. We organize in a way so that we can collaborate, so we can actually become better at what we do. We take our competitive competencies, we combine them with someone else, and there's synergy. So back to Gallup, they did the survey and they found out that across thousands and thousands of employees that they surveyed, that 82% of them said that their managers were not motivational, they were not influential.
Mm,
They didn't want to work for someone that was all about themselves and didn't care about the employee base. They didn't roll up their
mm,
sleeves. They were hiding in their offices. They weren't into the mission on an inclusive basis. So that means only 18% think their managers today are influential. I think that speaks loudly. And it tells us that if we are going to survive this corporate scene, and we need corporations, and we need
mhm,
entrepreneurs too, they become corporations someday. We have to pay attention to the quality of management and their ability to lead. And so I think that's really the
mm.
reason.
That, Gary, was spot on. Oh my gosh. It's really about humanity and communication. And you said authenticity. Well, when you are authentic and you're communicating in a way that your employees feel that authenticity, you're not, like you said, hiding in the office and only concerned with the bottom line, which I know a lot of that pressure comes from the very top. But like you said, the leadership flows down into the employees. So it's really interesting that you can often sense, especially a company that is more retail oriented, if the employees have a good either leadership or management, if they're happy. Because if they're not happy, it's usually due to the lack of good leadership or good management. But absolutely. And that's going to be a really big issue to address, because if you think about what the pandemic did and how we all became in our, we drew into our little cocoons, there is a big gap in the communication area for individuals to learn the empathy, to learn the communication, to be okay with being authentic and real with their employees. So that is spot on. Oh my gosh, I can see that, and it really really needs individuals like yourself. We have grown up in a different era, and we really need to step to the forefront and teach these young people what it means to really communicate with a human, because they're buried in their phones, they're buried in the technology. And yes, we need that. And yes, that can be very helpful. But at the end of the day, it comes down to who you are and how you serve others. So yes, that was fabulous, Gary. Thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely.
Jane,
I could see that.
so in response to thank you, we're on the same team, by the way. I think we
We
understand
are.
things on, and I worry about the young generation because they do hide behind their phones. They don't have the interaction. They're not collaborative. They are in a sense, but it's through text. And
Mm-hmm.
again, text is very powerful. I use it many times every day. But when it comes to relationships, I was on a radio show recently, and we were talking about, what does it require? And it requires interaction and collaborative and physical interaction at some point if we're going to do some great things together. So I gave a talk recently. It was a keynote at a leadership conference that I was involved in organizing. And the title of my talk was Leaders Are Made, Not Born.
Mm.
And why is that so important? Because people realize, and the reason people don't leave their companies because they're not happy with the pay or even the benefits. They don't leave the job, they leave their leaders. And so we have to be very, very focused on what it's going to take for leaders to step up to the plate again, to bring people together again, at some level, physically, at least periodically, so that we can touch, feel, get to know each other, and have that presence factor that I think is so important.
Yes, absolutely. It's an exchange of energy. When
Wow, I
you
love
walk
that.
into a
Very
room
good.
and you are, yeah, and you are a leader that is admired, you have a magnetism. And that is because you're drawing people to you. But you don't get that on a text. You don't get that on a Zoom call. It's when you step into that room, and it can work in the opposite as well. If you have that dark, heavy energy and people are like, "Oh gosh, here we go again." But seriously, when you are a leader, and like you said, an influential super leader, bingo, you sense that, you feel that. It's like when you get on a stage and people are there and they're listening to you and they feel you and they see your enthusiasm, your inspiration, and your passion. That does not come over a screen. And so yes, it is so vital to have that. Oh my gosh, we could do a whole podcast right on that. For
Let's do
sure.
it. Let's do
I
it.
love it. Yeah. Thank you so much for that
I love
information.
that.
But moving on, and I think you may have answered part of this question, is your new book, Become a Super Leader? a sequel to your strategic influence book. And you did mention that you took the last chapter. So did you want to embellish on that a little bit?
Yeah, let's do that. So my first book had 10 success factors, which lead you from no influence to having what I call strategic influence within your community, within your industry, within your company, whatever, meaning you're a center of influence. But number 8 was the following: it says identify and leverage your competitive competencies. Identify, which means they're personal, means they're not the same for everyone, and to leverage. Thank you for that picture. And to leverage what you're learning, what you're developing, and what you're acquiring in this particular skill set so that you can become an expert. So when I say become a super leader, I mean become an exceptional leader with expertise that people would recognize, when they know about you. So that book that you just put up there is chapter 8 from The Power of Strategic Influence. It deserved its own full book because I didn't explain in that book how you do that. How do you identify it, and how do you leverage your competitive competencies, and how do you use influence in the process to make yourself the kind of leader that people care about, people are attracted to. And so it was a chance for me to, for the first time in a book, to share what I've been teaching, what I've been using as a process for salespeople, support people, professional service people, entrepreneurs, white collar business people for the last 35 plus years. And Stephen Covey was a mentor of mine, and I've broadcasted his 7 habits all over the world. But in the process, that was a theoretical approach. He never gave you the constructs of what it takes to become an effective leader. He gave you 7 habits and said, go out and use them. But
Right.
I wanted to give you a specific program that I've been using with thousands of people over the years to help them become better at what they want to become better at, and to become the leader that people would say is authentic. So that's the reason this book also introduces for the first time some things about me. In my first book, I was criticized because I didn't say much about me at all. It was all about what I believed in, and how you develop influence. And so this book, the first, I don't know, 25, 30 pages is about my experiences, about my influencers, about my leadership. And because I want people to know that I've been in leadership for a long time, I know something about it, but at the same time, I have weaknesses just like everybody else. But mastery, that word mastery that you use, was key because we're not just trying to say, I got a certificate on this, I took a 2-week course, I did 2 weeks worth of study, and now I'm qualified. You're not nearly qualified. That just because you have a certificate, there's a big deal about these certificates these days. Mastery is when you are qualified to be considered to be an expert. That's when people stand up and say, whoa, I want to be in that session. That person is an expert at what he or she is talking about. Wow, I want to follow this person because I might learn something from their expertise. So that's the critical issue here. I call it mastery. Other people call it greatness or expertise. But I think the key, all I'm trying to say is that you need to become so good at something that someone would say you're an expert.
Yes, absolutely. And like you and I were discussing earlier, it takes practice and experience. It's you have to continue to work. I often associate it with athletic perfect performances, because they try over and over and practice and get better and better. And it's the same with anything in your life. It's business, it can be a career, it can be your whatever it might be. Is that once you have that knowledge, then you need to put that knowledge to work. Because when if all, like you say, if all you have is the theory, if all you have is the knowledge, but then you don't go and use that, or you don't experience what it's like, it doesn't mean anything. You can't say, well, I tried this, but you know what, this works better, or this is where I've come from and this is how I've grown. Because life is really about learning and growing. And the only way we do that is through practice and through learning and continuing to upgrade. I mean, that's at least how I feel. And I know we had
Well,
that earlier discussion. So yeah, it really
well,
makes a difference. So
you said it best, Jane, because you said that once you have the knowledge, then you need to put it to practice. I think there's a middle
mm,
part in that formula where your knowledge is gained as you experience. Putting it into
mm,
practice means it becomes knowledge. Otherwise, it's theory, it's belief, it's thoughts. But once you put that into practice, it becomes knowledge, and it becomes the ability to be able to prove that you know enough about it that you can help someone else learn it, and that you can add value, which is really the key part. How do you add value?
mm.
To others, to the organization, to the situation, to the moment, to the discussion.
Absolutely. And most importantly, Gary, it adds value to yourself and your leadership, because we have to lead ourselves first, right? Before we can lead others. It's a full circle.
We sure
It
do.
really is. But I found that
Yeah.
fascinating, that I love that your first book, something in your first book inspired the second. And it came through, like you said, most people read and then they were very interested in a specific topic. So that to me was it, I love that. I love when that happens. And actually what they say in life, there's no coincidences. So you planted a seed there, and it this is the growth. This is what's happened. This is what came out of it, is your new book here, Become a Super Leader. So that's fantastic. I love it. Now, gaining your superpower, how does someone recognize their personal superpower? I'm really curious about this.
Well, there's a few ways. First of all, I provide in the book the top 40 competencies based on 1,000+ leaders and what they think leadership is made of. What are the components? What are the traits? And we narrow it down to 13. Why 13? Because the system I've been teaching for 40+ years, really, is a system that was developed by Benjamin Franklin in 1726. When he was 20 years old, he stopped what he was doing, even though he was already successful in publishing and printing. But he decided that there were things about himself he didn't like, behaviors that he thought didn't appeal to people and didn't put his reputation in the best light. And so, have you ever heard that story? Have you ever heard this?
No.
Oh, you haven't? Oh, wow. That's awesome. So, he created something he called 13 virtues. They were things such as, I'll put them in today's terms: drinking too much, talking too much, um, you know, not being honest all the time, not being humble enough. I mean, all these things that he felt like he wasn't consistent at. And so 13, and then he developed a system where he would weekly focus on one of them. So think about it for a second. Think of the things that you want to become better at, and focus on that one attribute. I know you have a busy life, your week's going to be full of activities, but focus on the mindset of that one item, that one characteristic for the entire week. So every waking hour, in the back of your mind, you're going to be thinking, okay, well, I'm not going to tell white lies anymore. I'm going to be fully honest in every way that I can. If I'm going to say something, I'm going to tell the truth in some way so that I don't fudge. I mean, you're always trying to think of how you can become better at that. Someday you want to become reputable for that trade, not just happy about what you're doing. Well, and we provide the top 13 that we suggest. If you don't have your own, try these. They were based on 1,000 people. You can't go wrong. But write down the 13 you're comfortable with. And as you use this system week by week, focusing on one, you're going to notice that one of them or two of them are come to you much quicker as far as proficiency goes. You become proficient much faster because you're getting response from people around you. You can see the
Mm.
response and the results of what you're doing. So I think you narrow it down to two or three, and then you focus on one and say, "That's it. That's the one." In the book, I tell a story about me when I left high tech. I left corporate, decided to go into entrepreneurship like my father, my grandfather had. It was time. But I was in the middle of building a multi-million dollar home. I needed cash flow, and I didn't have a really good plan yet. And so when I told my wife I was doing this, she was happy because I was going to be home more because I traveled consistently as a VP of sales. But where's the money going to come from? And I said, oh my gosh, people recruit me and people hire me because I can build out companies. I can hire, I can recruit, I can sell, I can do all these things. I'm strategic, I'm creative, I'm process oriented. I know how to build something from scratch and mostly worked in startups. I said, so I think I'm fine, don't worry. At the same time, I'm going to pull together a business that I can run and that I can grow quickly, hopefully. And so I went on a journey and I went to my network. I'm all about business networking. And I found brokers that were referred to me. I found opportunities that were, available. I evaluated over 200 businesses in about a 3 or 4 month period, traveled all over the United States. I was looking for something domestic. I narrowed that list down to 10, and I bought 7 very small businesses. One of them was a little bit bigger, and they were kind of related. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to follow the money. I'm going to just throw my efforts at all of these. I'll get some help. My family wanted to help, had friends that wanted to help, and we'll see where it sticks. And in the process, I asked my own self, this is before I ever wrote this book, what am I good at? What are the things I can really rely upon? Creativity was good. My proactivity was really good. My integrity was good. I mean, so I didn't have to worry about reputation. I didn't have to worry about uh, work ethic was really super good. But the thing that I learned about myself that was super about me, and it's because I've got not only feedback, but I've seen the results every single time, is something called adaptability. And that's one of the top competencies, by the way. So I am very adaptable. I may not like what I'm dealing with. I may not like the situation I'm put in, but I'm super adaptable. I can pivot and I can assess and I can make a plan and I can move very quickly. So that's one thing that's become my one superpower. I think I have others that could become potentially superpowers, but that's the one thing I noticed about it. So I think you come up with a list. You can borrow ours, borrow mine, and work them one at a time. And the 1 or 2 or 3 that you think you have more capability, more proficiency, more speed of capability towards, those are the ones you focus on. And then hopefully you can narrow down to one and say, I want to be known for this. I want to have a legacy for adaptability, for humility, for creativity, for innovation, whatever yours is. I think that's what you have to do.
I love that you give the list of examples because often people get stuck when you say, well, put a list together of what you feel are your competencies or your habits or whatever it might be. And often what happens is people are like the deer in the headlights are like, what? Where do I start? And then that grinds them to a halt. It actually does the opposite because you have so much static trying to generate a list that you've kind of gone sideways on your purpose for the exercise. But so I love that, Gary, because then, and like you said, you could borrow from yours or maybe get inspired from your list, and therefore it gives you ideas. Oh, this is what he means. This is what he means by a list of competencies or what you would feel is one of your strengths. And then find the alignment, what resonates with you. To me, that's really what you're doing is, not only having people say you're really good at this, but like you said, it has to resonate with you, because otherwise then in the end, it's more like a struggle. It's not your passion. It's not your path. And like you said, you're good at many things, but you found your calling, and it's the work that you go through, the exercising. We're going right back full circle to what you said about finding you having your your the knowledge, but then the experience and the exercise of how you got there. So this is, for me, is the exercise. This is exercising some of the knowledge that you have, because let's face it, whatever competency you're good at, you're going to have some knowledge behind it, you hope. And then you find that, and then you exercise it, and does it align, doesn't align, does it make sense? Are people, do they feel that you have this as a core value, as a leadership skill? And then you go into the experience. So yes, I see the puzzle just coming together. That's wonderful. I love it. I love it. So
Well,
thank you for
thanks for
that.
that feedback. Thanks for that feedback, because that validates, right, that the approach I'm taking is to make it easy for people. But
Yes.
it's based upon study and research and validation. It's not. I'm just not trying to give you something to work on that's not effective. It's been proven to be effective over my lifetime and over other leaders that have used their process, to become successful and also competent. But in
Yes.
my first book, if you remember my first book, I explained a concept called PDF. And I'm not talking about the Adobe PDF. I'm talking about personal driving forces. When you start something, first of all, you have to have purpose behind it. And I
Mhm.
call purposes for your different roles in your life personal driving forces. And that
Mm.
means in order to become an expert at anything, you have to be passionate about it. So it needs to be something you like, that you're excited about, something that you are motivated to be involved in. It's something you enjoy. You don't mind spending hours and hours and hours of, doing it, like Beethoven, who worked at his skill for his entire life. There's other people who are prodigies, by the way, and Beethoven wasn't a prodigy, believe it or not. He just became passionate about composing and developing, wonderful music. And later on, they said he was perhaps better than Mozart, who was a prodigy. So my book is not about super prodigies. There aren't that many of them. And so I'm not looking for prodigies to teach how to become better at what they do. I'm looking for anyone that has zeal, interest, drive, and passion to become better at what they do, better as a leader, better at whatever they do. This isn't just about leader. I mean, this could be applied to almost anyone who wants to excel. But I'm into leadership, and business is important to me, and so I made it all about business. So yeah, I think it's important, and I think that you have to be on top of your own goals and on top of where you're going, and giving you a system that's ready made can change. By the way, Benjamin Franklin, 13 virtues. He started when he was 20. He died when he was 84, believe it or not.
Wow.
Pretty amazing. In 1790, he lived
Mhm.
84 years back when they were only living in their 30s. But because of his practice of all these things, he wanted to eat better, drink less, talk less about it. He didn't perfect it. In the end of his life, he said, I didn't perfect the things I was so passionate about in developing. He says, but I am so much better a person and much happier because of trying to do that, for having attempted it. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's all we're trying to do. I mean, let's make the most of our lives. Let's make the most of our
Right.
career, and rather than just be haphazard. And that happens. Sometimes that you get into a job, you stay with it long enough, you'll become a leader or a manager at least.
Mhm.
Why not do it on purpose? Why not do it, with a plan? And why not do it on things that you care about, not that are being given to you by other people? So anyway, I think I'm
Mm.
pretty passionate about that idea. I think it makes sense.
I love that. Do it on purpose. That's fabulous. That's a book cover to me. Do it on purpose. That is so powerful. Just those words. It is. Do it on purpose.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
for
Let's live
sure.
life on
Like
purpose. Exactly.
instead of just floating, do it on purpose. I love it. Well, thank you for that insight. And now, what is the difference, all of this coming full circle, between leadership and influential leadership? Because we hit on that a little bit at the beginning, because there is a big difference.
Well, I think in bottom line, it's really the same thing. You're really not a leader unless you're influential. And you can't be
Yeah.
influential unless you're becoming the leader that
Mhm.
people respect, admire, and want to follow. So I think I would probably distinguish between management, manager, boss, and leader. And let's say if we're going to be a leader, we want to be influential. So I can have the makings of a leader, but to become truly influential, I think you're right. We have to do things to make a difference. My friend Gary Kennedy, who was the first president of Oracle, when I interviewed him for my first book, I asked him, I said, what does it take to become a leader? You've been a leader your whole life, been very successful. And he says, well, I made a decision when I was young that I was not going to do something unless I could make a difference, unless I felt passionate that I could make a difference in doing it. That was whether he was going to take a job that might have been, very enticing, that had great pay, or to become a board member, to become a charitable, advisor, whatever he does, he would never make a decision on the spot. He would step back and he would ask himself, okay, they could probably hire a lot of people. And you're taking risks when you do this because you might lose that job and may not
Mhm.
find the next one. But he's always never had that problem, of course. But you ask yourself, can I make a difference? If I step in and I do this, am I the person that's going to help make a difference at this? And if you have that mindset, if you have that goal in mind, then you'll become an influential leader because you'll be caring about the people, the contribution you make, the value you bring. You'll be wanting to contribute yourself. I mean, it's just a natural pattern if you follow, that authentic interpretation of who you really are.
Yes, absolutely. Being influential is making a difference. Yeah, it really it does. I mean, it's making a difference in everything. It's not just making a difference to the bottom line. It's making a difference in the lives of those you're leading. It's making a difference in your own life. It's making a difference in the community. And when you look at that from that point of view, it really makes you pause and say, yes, this, like, that's a question. Will this make a difference, and how will it make a difference? And the ripple effect that will happen whether you do or don't do it, is it good or isn't it? Just weighing that, putting that on a scale, is great perspective, because I don't know this, but maybe a lot of CEOs and very top leaders don't look at it that way. I come from a financial background, so of course everything was about the bottom line. It didn't matter if it
Yeah,
made if you influenced anybody, as long as you and the firm were making money, that's all that mattered. And so it was really not. It's very that industry doesn't have much heart, is what I put it, how I put it.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
But that being said, like you said, being influential requires that thought process, requires that, okay, how is this going to influence not just myself, but those around me? Yeah, I love that. That is so powerful. Absolutely. Yeah.
So Jane,
Thank you for that.
I almost went into the financial industry. I had an opportunity to work for Goldman Sachs, and I kicked
Mm,
myself because they hadn't gone public yet. And so I pursued other things in high tech, et cetera. I had a good career. But in the end, it's interesting to see, what you end up doing for what reasons. And, I made
mm,
a decision before I ever got into business. I was not going to do things that jeopardized my family, my marriage, my friendships. Integrity was a huge, huge, huge thing to me. I don't use it as a superpower because even though it's me through and through, because I think that's such a sacred, kind of condition. And I don't want to
mm.
wear that on my sleeve. That I'm an integrity type person, that I'm honest, even though ethics are super important. I just think that you have to be really true to who you are. And if you want to know which things you should choose for this list of 13, and I need to explain why there's 13, by the way. Look at the people you admire. Think of the leaders that you call leaders.
Mm.
Think of the people that influence you, that you admire, and then stop and think, what are the attributes that they display? Why do they impress you? when you're with them, why do you, when you walk away, why do you talk about what they say? Why do you try to, foster the principles they teach you? It's because you want the same thing. You relate to those items. You relate to the things that you admire. And so, yeah, that should probably be on your list. I think that's an easy way to create your list. And then the 13, can I explain that really quickly?
Yeah, actually, that's going to segue right into our next question. So it's perfect because I said, what kind of self development program do you recommend for aspiring or emerging leaders? And this is like absolutely perfect. I love it. Go for it.
Well, let me explain it in these terms. So Benjamin Franklin, who I have been studying my whole life, he's amazing, was an amazing person. Hopefully he still is. I believe we're going to live after this life. So there's a process that I want you to go through, and there's 8 steps to help you get to the plan that we're talking about. And then I give you all the forms. I give you a way to measure your success and your development throughout the book. And so here's one of the forms that so I make it really easy for you. You can photocopy these in some future day. It hasn't been too long since I published this book, but I'm going to have a planner that you can use to make this all work. And I've got the beginnings of one already. So back to the system. 13. Benjamin Franklin chose 13. Why? Why would he use such an odd number for trying to make himself a better person? So Jane, how many weeks are there in a year? Well, so
I was going to say,
52. How many
go ahead.
times? So now I don't need you to. I don't want to use the calculator here, but how many times do you think 13 goes into 52?
I don't know.
4. Okay, I'll just give you the answer. So think about it. There's 13 weeks times 2 is 26 times 2 is 52. 13 goes into 52, 4 times exactly. Benjamin Franklin was a genius, not only because of who he was, but because of this system. He created what I call a perpetual self-development program. I call it self-mastery program. So imagine you start with one item of the 13. You focus the entire week mindset-wise on this item. At the end of the week, you make a few notes. You make some goals to how to improve it the next time. You move on to number 2. At the end of 13, you've gone through 1/4 of the year exactly. You start over with number 1 all over again. By the end of the year, you've gone through each of those for 1 week and focus for 1 week 4 different times. So now Benjamin Franklin never said this was a 1-year program. He said it was a program for a life. And he practiced this over a lifetime and never perfected it. So that tells you something, that people that go out and say, I need to become better at this. I'm going to spend 2 weeks at it, go to a course, get my certificate. And now, people, I can put my name on that list. I'm proficient, maybe an expert someday. Well, that's not the case. It takes a long time to become good, so good at something that they call you an expert. The system is perpetual. At the end of the year, you do an assessment. You look at what you've done. You score it. On my book, I give you a way to score it. And you better not score a 5, 1 out of 5 the first time, because then it shouldn't have been on your list. You better be scoring 1s and 2s. And hopefully over 10 years, which some people think it takes to become an expert, you hopefully will get to a 4. If you're very, 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 very good and everybody thinks so and you're the best of the best, the GOAT, maybe you're a 5 in 10 years, maybe. But it's that difficult. That's why you need a system, and that's why it needs to be simple to put into practice. And I love the way this works. And I have the top 13. We took the top 40, and we divided those between the anchors. The anchors are our character. It had to be character. Anchor 1 for developing leadership had to be character. You can't have your character in question and become a leader. You can't. Number 2 is mindset. So what is your mindset? And that's what we've just been talking about. What is your mindset this week? And I use the weeks because then it works into this wonderful program. Number 3 is learning. You have to be continual on a learning basis, continual learner, they say lifelong learner. I think you have to do that. The flip side of that is innovation. I want to learn and innovate. Now, by the way, all of us should have mentors. Do you agree? Do you think we should have mentors?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yes,
I have two.
absolutely.
I have two today. I have one called trial and one called error.
Mm.
That's a joke. But you said it. You have to practice. You have to work at it. And over a lifetime, imagine the legacy you could create if you focused on things throughout your life and made it a habit. Now, one last thing is the first 13 you choose don't have to be rigid. You may just want to get started. The whole idea about life is getting started. Don't wait. Don't procrastinate. Take the 13 that I got out of my survey, and put them into practice. At the end of the year, if you think,
Mm.
well, 8 of these are great, but 5 are not, I'll never ever, become an expert at these 5. It's too hard for me. Substitute it. Even Benjamin Franklin, over a lifetime, every year or two, he said he would take out one and put in something new. But that first list of 13 was pretty amazing. So I think the system is built for the individual to make it easy, to give you the ability to put into practice things you're passionate about, to do things on purpose, and to create a system that can help you become a better person, number one, better leaders, number two, and create a legacy, number three.
Mm. Perfect. I love it. And I love the idea, Gary. It's like a system that you are always referring back to it. It's not like you said you go and learn something for a year, a couple of weeks, you get a certificate, and then it all it goes by the wayside. This is something where you're always up leveling or upgrading yourself and and reminding yourself of your purpose and where you're going and what I need to look at, because we do change. And I love that you said that he changed some things, because we all change as we go through life. We learn more, we experience, and hopefully we gain wisdom. Not everyone does, but that's something. And also, one of the things that I picked up on was, I love that you said, look at the people you admire and then write down what you admire about those individuals and use that for your list, or even look at your list and see if it's on your list, because that is a really big, for me, that's a big eye opener. And it makes it, you often look at individuals and you admire them, but you don't ask yourself, why do I admire them? But this makes you focus on what it is that you admire about this individual. And then rather than just moving on, say, okay, I'm going to look at Gary's list and see if it's on there. And if not, I'm going to add it to my list, because that really is for me, that helps individuals get themselves in the mindset of where they need to be looking. And then maybe for me, the antenna goes up and you're in a state of awareness. Like you might be watching someone and you're all of a sudden you're going, oh, I really like this person, let me explore why that is, because your awareness has been heightened by your program. So yeah, I really love that. And speaking of mindset, I know we touched on it, but what would you say is the kind of mindset that is needed for influential leadership? I mean, I mentioned awareness, consciousness. Is there something that you wanted to expand on for the mindset, because that really does go deep?
Well, yeah, the answer is we have a whole anchor,
Oh,
a whole
that's
section on
right.
it.
You do.
And that particular, so here's a table. I'll just show you. You can
Okay,
see it. Oops, try to
great.
get it to the camera.
Oh, the other
Anyway,
way.
so
There you go.
anchor number 2 is mindset. And there are
Mhm.
10 competencies, 10 of the top competencies that were from the survey that deal with mindset. They have adaptability was mine. That's on the list.
Mhm.
Authenticity. Think of the mindset. Positivity, servant leadership,
Mm.
courage, proactivity, focusing on results. Even though you got to care about the people, you still have to have results to keep your company on afloat. The next one is self-awareness. Number 9 is survival mindset, and generosity is number 10. So
Mm,
if you want mindset, you can, so these 4 anchors, you want to go in and say, I want something from each. That's what I would do. I'd say, I need 13. There's 4 anchors. There's 10 competencies in each of them. I want to come up with a balance effect. So I have good character. I have the proper mindset. So I'm a constant learner. And finally, so that I can become influential, which is number 4. And so I think
right.
that's how I would use the system, even though you can use it the way you want to. So
Yeah, absolutely fabulous. I love it. All everything you need is at your fingertips in the book, for sure.
I
Absolutely.
really
And if it's
tried to do
not,
it that
doesn't,
way. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. It really will turn the light bulb on. Let's put it that way. And if it doesn't, well, then you need to go back and read it again because you're blocking something for sure. Absolutely. Well, and I love that you include several interviews in your book, and you did this in the first one as well. Why did you do that, and why do you feel that that is so important to add to the the experience of people reading your book?
Thank you for asking that question. That's one of the first people that's ever asked me that. So I think it's because I want to show that great leaders out there today are exemplifying the principles I'm teaching. When I first started The Power of Strategic Influence, my first book, I wasn't quite sure where the book was going to go. I created a chapter. I was really disoriented. I didn't really have a plan. So I stayed up all one night and decided, okay, I need to come up with what I call um, a roadmap for my book or a table of contents roadmap. And so I did. I came up with it. And one of the things that came out in my brainstorm, staying up all night, was that I needed examples. And I wanted them to be examples of people that I interviewed so that I could delve into the topics and we could then identify 1 or 2 of the topics that they related to so well that they deserve to be in that section of the book, following that chapter, following that concept, following that section. So my first book, I interviewed 12 people. I had 12 chapters. That was a lot of work. I have to tell you, interviewing 12 leaders and then producing it like a mini book for the section they were in. This time, because I did sections, it was so much easier. I had 4 sections, 4 anchors. I chose 4 leaders. They are all fabulous. 2 men, 2 women, 2 women, 2 men, including uh, Cindy Bigelow, who is the CEO of
Mm,
Bigelow Tea. They own 26% of the U.S. market. She was a classmate of mine at Northwestern. I've always wanted to interview her. She's fabulous. This business was started by her grandmother, and she has a great story to tell. And she is in the book, and really needed to be in it. Let's use the next one. Nando Cesaron is the president of U.S. UPS. So UPS over
mm,
the U.S. operations. He has the biggest um, revenue responsibility for any executive in the firm, like something like 60 billion. I mean, it's huge.
wow.
Um, he is a very authentic guy, and I met him through another contact. I was introduced to him. In the process, one of the competencies in the book is emotional intelligence. It's
Mhm.
a popular term these days. People talking about how you gain emotional competency and intelligence, so that you can relate to the people for the right reasons. So you can discuss things that encompass the entirety of the business, employees, the customers, the partners, the leaders. So he was that person. He needed to be in that section of the book. When I went to UPS to do the interview, we did a live interview and had it recorded at headquarters. The first thing we did is he met me and we just talked for like 20, 30 minutes. It was an
Mm,
unusual experience. I've dealt with executives my whole life, selling to executives, partnering with executives, and they all want to sit down and get right to the
yeah.
agenda
Mhm.
because they're busy people, and I don't fault them for
Mhm.
that. Nando doesn't have a problem with being busy. I guarantee that. But he took the time to get to know me. before we ever got into this
Mm.
interview. Then we walked into this room where they had the cameras set up. And again, once again, he didn't sit down and say, "Oh, how do we start?" He spent time getting to know the camera crew. How are you?
Mm.
How long have you been here? Are you enjoying your day? I mean, all this stuff. I was so impressed. Now, I interviewed him once again at this, what I call influential leadership symposium. I'm doing this with universities. And the first
Mhm.
one we did was at the University of South Carolina in Columbia. And we had the mayor speak, we had the dean of business speak. I organized the event, so it was a lot of fun. Nando Cesarone came and he wanted me to interview him. And during that interview, I explained what I just told you, and he said, "Well, that's not unusual for me." And he wasn't trying to brag. He just says, "That's important to me. I do that everywhere I
Mm.
go. I'm not in a hurry." And he said that he has this philosophy of if he had a superpower, is that he doesn't react. And you'll learn that in the interview in my book. I said, "What do you mean by that?" He says, "Well, if it's good news, I try not to react because I might react too much. I might do a high five and I needed to know more details. If it's bad news, I try not to react. I want to be calm so that I can think, assess, and make the right decisions or give the right kind of support." I thought it was genius, and it really fits that emotional intelligence mode. So
Right.
he's my right after the character anchor and fits so well into it. The other two people, I'm sorry I'm going so long, but the other two people are um, Jody Richards. She is the CEO of Process Technology. I was introduced to her from a common friend, and she runs this company that helps companies who manufacture semiconductors, to be much more quality assured. I'm trying to remember all the things it does, but anywhere you find semiconductors, her company's involved. She's fabulous. She's been Entrepreneur of the Year with Ernst and Young. She's a lifelong learner. That's the section I put her in. She knows like 4 or 5 languages. I mean, she's an amazing person, amazing leader. And every one of these leaders are so different. They have different competencies. And the fourth one is David Meltzer. And David was the CEO of a company called Lee Steinberg Sports Agency back when Jerry Maguire, the movie, was created. And
Mm.
himself in the movie was the example and the inspiration behind that movie. And
Mm.
he's all about abundance, and he wants to impact 1 billion people in his lifetime to bring more joy to them. And he wants to make a lot of money too, but he wants to help other people gain joy in the process. So really great people. He fit the last one. When it comes to influence, I thought he was the perfect person for that section because he spends his time focusing on everything around him and this abundance
Right.
things, which I think is really cool. So that's why. I hope that answers it. That's a
Yeah.
long answer.
No, absolutely. I mean, fascinating, and we resonate with stories. I mean, as humans, it's what makes it real. It brings the concept or the teaching or the knowledge into real life. And there's nothing better than the stories that can enlighten us, but also inspire us. Because without the stories, like you said, it's just a fact or it's a theory, whatever it might be. But the stories bring it to life. That's what it is. The stories bring it to life. And that's what we're all here for, is to experience those. And if we experience them through someone else, therein lies the inspiration. You know, that's what lights.
Well,
It might not resonate with
yeah.
everybody, but it will inspire some. And then that becomes the influence, right?
Well, you
It
you really hit the
flows.
nail on the head. You really hit the nail on the head, and I think that's how people learn. If they can think of an example, it's easy to remember an example or a story. It's like a song.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yep.
never forget the song. You might forget the words, but you never forget the tune or the meaning. And
Right.
so I think that's really critical. And that's why I was prompted to put more of myself in the first book. And so I'm in the preface. The preface is about my life. It's not part of the book, but it's the preface. It's like 25 pages. And I share my three greatest influencers in my life, which includes my dad,
Mm.
uh, includes Dan Gable, who some people never heard of before unless you're a wrestling fan. And I'm not talking about, professional wrestling. I'm talking about collegiate type of wrestling. Dan Gable I met once upon a time, and he taught me more in 4 days about wrestling than I had learned in 4 years, or three and a half years up to that point. And the final influencer is Stephen R. Covey, who I got to spend 10 years observing, learning from, collaborating with. This is before he wrote the book Seven Habits. So at the end of the 10th year, is the year that he published that book, I knew him 10 years before that, and then got to have him introduce habits. He didn't call them the seven habits at the time, these habits to my sales organization. And we were good examples, and I think because he needed to test them on people that were learning and developing, and but I've never forgotten them. They've been so instrumental in my life. More importantly, is I've been able to extrapolate, extend, and build systems and processes around those habits that make my books, I think very, very pragmatic. I think so.
Yes, absolutely. Much more than pragmatic, though, too. They're inspiring, and therein lies the influence. So yes, absolutely. Something went off in my mind. It says being authentic is bringing it to life, whatever that is, because that's what people crave is our authenticity. Why? Because that's bringing it to life. That's who we are. That's bringing who we are really to the table. And a lot of times, especially in
Yeah.
business, that's difficult. And that's why I love the example that you gave with your second, the gentleman who you said he always takes the time to get to know people, and he spent time with you. And you, being having been an executive and myself as well, I understand how valuable people's time is. So when you get someone like that, you're like, whoa, this, I really enjoy speaking with this gentleman. He really has an interest in me, which is in executive levels, especially at his level, is like unheard of. Because you're right, all they want to do is get to the bottom line. But you see, that brought it to life, and that brought him to life. So absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much, Gary, for those stories. I love it. And this is why
Yeah.
everyone needs to take a look at this book, because it brings to life all of the practices in the program that are in the book, but through real life stories. And I love that you put them in with each anchor, because it totally resonated with me how you placed them each and why you placed each of them there. So yeah, great work, by the way. Fabulous. I love it.
Thank you.
So that being said, where can our
Yeah.
audience connect with you?
Well, so I think the easiest place, if you're in business, on LinkedIn. So look up Gary Laney. My middle initial is C. So Gary C. Laney. There's only one of me, one of us, I should say. And so you can follow me, but connect with me. I love to connect with people.
Right.
That's been my life. I used to be the CEO and co-founder of a company called Trustegrity. And I did that because I love to collaborate. I love to help people. That's really my mission in life. And I've been in so many businesses that it's easy for me to adapt. And somebody gets involved in one of my businesses or in a new situation or initiative, I have no problem giving them advice. If they want to come and they want me to brainstorm with them, I can do it on a sales level, a marketing level, on a strategic level. I can do it on, an operations level. So that's really one of my favorite things to do. And then you can also go to GaryCLaney.com. And I think even GaryLaney.com works the same way. You can also go to Amazon, and you can put in Gary Laney, and both of my books will pop up. And I expect we're going to probably have one or two other books before I'm finished, more in the future. But right now I'm focusing on the super leadership concept, and that's what I'm speaking on.
Great, wonderful. And again, we'll have all that information in the Epic Vision Zone bio pages, but thank you for sharing that. And yes, I know Gary's go-to is LinkedIn, so be sure to connect with Gary on LinkedIn. And if there was one message, Gary, that you'd like to share with the world, what would it be?
Well, you started the contribution at the very beginning of this podcast by talking about you can learn leadership. I think it's so important for people to realize that you want to become a leader, it takes work. You don't just automatically fall into it. You might work hard at a company, and over time, they'll give you some management opportunity. But more importantly, as you take that as a goal, forget the company you're working for, focus on the person you want to become, the leader you want to become, and develop the habits that'll help you work towards making that come true. There was a time when I was growing up when they said that you could develop a habit in 21 days. Do something for 21 days and it'll become a habit. But that's been debunked since then because it takes much more time than that. The person that made that a popular concept was a guy named Maxwell Maltz, who wrote a book called Cybernetics. He was a plastic surgeon, and whenever he did surgery and fixed the issue the person wanted to have fixed, he said they didn't immediately look at themselves in the mirror and say, I have great confidence. There was still some emotional and mental mindset that had to be changed. There had to be a transition. And for him, he figured out it was 21 days. And so that's why people said it's 21 days for a habit. Since then, they've said it might take years, but most of the time, months at least, where you could do something where it now becomes habitual and you want to keep doing it. You don't have to force yourself. It's part of your nature. It's part of your daily routine. If you can do that, if you can create the habits with the right formula, meaning the right aspects of what you want to develop and become, and practice that with this perpetual system that I talked about, minimum of a year, but try it for 10 years, and you'll find out you've become an expert in something. And that would be
Oh,
really amazing for anybody to say that.
yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for that. And because we're here on the Epic Vision Zone, and I know you've had this in a previous interview, but let's go with the flow here. If your life
Okay.
were an epic story, what would the title be?
Well, I would love it to say that Gary had integrity, but I'll get a little emotional about that because that was the most important thing to my father. That if there's
Mm,
anything I accomplished, is that I had integrity.
mm.
And I could say that my superpower was adaptability, but I want people to know that the thing I cared about the most was integrity. I think that's it.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you again for being here and joining us, Gary, today. And be sure to check out Gary's website at garyclaney.com and his new book, Become a Super Leader, The 4 Essential Anchors for Mastering Influential Leadership, which you can get on Amazon. And you can also find all of Gary's social media links and contact information, once again, on the Epic Vision Zone bio pages. And be sure to follow me on Instagram at Jane Applegath. And don't forget to reach out to me at janeapplegath.com, where you can access your free downloads, the keys to your dreams, and looking forward to connecting with you. This is the Epic Vision Zone, transforming your dreams into epic success.